Okay, we're live. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Sorry for the mix-up with the original starting time and the time now. Today we have a guest, Mary Connors, from the Buncrana area, who's going to share with us some research that's been done in the Netherlands. Mary, not all homeowners are happy to be videoed, which is perfectly fine. Mary is one of those, so that's no problem. Um, Mary, could I ask you just to introduce yourself and to introduce the topic you're presenting today?
Okay, basically, this is the report. This is a about a 150-page report, and it is the parliamentary inquiry into the whole issue of the impact of gas extraction on the residents of Groningen, which is again in the northern part of the Netherlands. And back in 1956, they found this gas field. And so they set up a company that was made up, it was a public private partnership that they started with the government and with Shell and Exxon to extract gas. And anyway, it made the country very wealthy. I think from one of the issues here is it basically made the country 363 billion euro. So there was a big interest in keeping this gas extraction going. And around 19 um, around the 1980s, they started to get earthquakes. And at first, they didn't think that there was any correlation between the extraction and on the earthquakes, but then later they did find out that yes, this was happening. Now, one of the reasons why this was happening is because they have a specific type of soil in this area, and the extraction was causing what they call induced earthquakes. And when they have these induced earthquakes, they're very sort of shallow to the surface of the land, and it was starting to impact the residents and um, causing structural damages to people's homes. So, and it took like years and years before anything came about to stop this. But there are so many correlations between this study or this parliamentary inquiry and what we are going through here. So when I was reading it with an eye to looking at the comparisons of what's been happening here. And one of the things that you'll see is that because they were so far north, they were, far away from the seats of power, just very similar to Donegal here, in that we feel like we have sort of no impact in our government. Um, the other issue was that a lot of the government agencies were quite muddled in what they were doing and their roles. So, there was a lot of misinformation that went on, or lack of information that went on from this semi-private public gas company and the Minister of Economic Affairs. So those things were happening. There was also issues around civil servants um, who were working for the government, but not really working for the people. And many of them had independent jobs the um, working with the oil companies. So there was this whole clash of what was going on there. Um, Once they started to work on helping the citizens of Groningen, the bureaucracy and the red tape that went on was so overwhelming that people were complaining of health issues. They've even cited premature deaths. Um, there were times when sometimes people needed to have their houses inspected like 19 times, um, in order to get involved with the redress programs that they had. So there were constant changes in the rules. Um, and then the rules were strict for the homeowners, but not strict for the government, which is many times what we see here too. Um, Basically, the interest of the gas companies were more important than the residents. And the other issue is that in the beginning of exploring all of this, the government didn't really have a good grasp of the science around reinforcements, like how do you reinforce these houses so that they will be earthquake proof. So many interesting issues that came up that were very similar to our issues here. um,
Don't forget the slides, Mary, if you want me to go through any of the
okay, we'll
slides.
go to the next slide.
The second slide.
Yeah.
Oops, sorry. Oh, yeah, I'm clicking the wrong thing. Excuse me. Okay, here's the second one.
Yeah, there have been like 267,000 claims for damage, and with approximately 85,000 addresses. Um, what I read from 2022 to 2028, it's going to cost 8 billion of the cost to reinforce the houses. Sometimes houses have to be rebuilt. Um, what's also happening is that it's because of the earthquakes, you not only have residential areas, but also, farm buildings, commercial buildings, schools. So they're dealing with those kinds of things too, very similar to what we're dealing with. Um, and, one of the things that they talked about was that for every euro that they spend, 74 cents is spent on implementation of the redress. So in some of the recommendations, they basically said you have to stop doing this. The cost of trying to make things harder for people is just costing the government more. And I think we also see that too here in in the in the defective concrete block scheme.
Yeah, just, I mean, for example, the whole idea that each county has to fight to get on the scheme would be one example of that. It's an unnecessary expense. It should just be a scheme for the whole country.
Right.
But sorry, go ahead, Mary.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and from this they've developed some recommendations that that we should talk about, and our government should be taking these recommendations on board. So what happened with the finally with the parliament, the government finally, I think it was 2018, um, moved that they have a parliamentary inquiry, and from the parliamentary inquiry, um, these are the recommendations, and um, oops, um, make claims handling easier, less harsh, and more humane. Give residents clarity about reinforcement quickly. One of the things that was happening is that people would get a letter from the government saying your house is not safe. And then it was taking 2 years before, you know, finally their house could be either reinforced or rebuilt, which, left people just living in these environments of living in an unsafe house. And, there's been like over 1,000 earthquakes in this area, and they're still they have stopped extracting the gas, but there's still they're still getting these minor tremors and things like that. So, and the other thing is that many people had to go back with each earthquake, go back and get reinforced again, because with each earthquake there was damage. So um, that's one of the
Can I
issues.
just interject briefly, just to let people know that the earthquakes are caused directly from the gas extraction. I just wanted to add that in.
Right. Yeah. Right. Um, given that this area, so many people worked in the gas industry to kind of stop things and then stop the extraction, meant that there was economic downfall over this. So they were looking. One of the recommendations is the offer to, provide some, you know, uh, a future for for the people there, whether it's jobs or university or what. They're willing to do that. The next is to see that there is enough money available for handling of claims, reinforcement, and future cost. A number of years back, they said they were going to deal with this. The reinforcement of homes, but then they didn't have the budget to deal with it. So this was a plea to make sure that there was enough money to do what they say that they're going to do. Um, they also wanted to strengthen the role of the regulator, because there were so many issues with the regulator and the bureaucracy around the. So that was another recommendation. Increase the importance of the public interest within departments, and this was sort of an um, all Netherlands issue, that the people in government were not listening to the people on the ground, and there was just this big disconnect. Um, and so uh, they said that once they started to send out the civil servants to visit the area, they got to understand the issue. And that's something, of course, we've done that here with the EU group, and some other politicians have come up here and they've seen it for themselves what the issues are. Number 7 was to strengthen the role of the House of Representatives, because there were issues around what was happening in the House of Representatives at the time. So that was another one. Um, Structure future public private partnerships better. Now, one of the things that had happened here when they first started this public private venture with the gas companies was that they set it up so that they didn't even have to do a public annual report. This whole issue of, the state, Exxon, and Mobil sort of were running their own show, and, you know, weren't really providing information and knowledge that they had to the politicians. So that was a big issue. They also wanted to strengthen the knowledge development of the subsurface, because, as I said, these earthquakes are close to the surface, and they really aren't. They need to do more studying in this field. Um, and then there's a commitment to spatial organization of the subsurface. And then number 11 is an invitation for the people of Groningen. Now, what they refer to this all as is redeeming a debt of honor, because on the back of um, the uh, the Dutch government making this 363 billion, that was on the backs of the destruction of the homes and the stress that the residents of Groningen had to endure. So they feel that there's this, debt of honor to these people. Now, how they're going to work on that is, they're working on that right now, how they will try to honor that area, whether it's with, as I said, putting money into investments and businesses and leisure areas, because the thing that's happening, very much what will be happening to us, is that sort of whole communities are being, under construction. So we're going to see that too when we have estates. How long will it take an estate to, you know, rebuild all the houses in an estate, and how long it depends on how they're going to do things. And they have come up with some ideas around looking at things from an area led perspective of taking areas and working on areas like we've seen, take an estate agency and try to do a lot of them at the same time, rebuild as many as you can at the same time. Um, so there's that perspective. There's so many correlations with what we're going through and the things that we have to think about and what they've been through, that I think that anybody who reads this can learn from it. Grant?
Sorry, I had my mic muted. Mary, can I ask you some questions
Yeah,
from
go
that?
ahead.
Was there any attempt to get the EU involved to kind of coerce the Netherlands government to take some action?
No, not in this report. There was not one mention of the EU, which I found kind of interesting too, because it just was so frustrating for the people um, to try to deal with this.
When did it start roughly? Is there some kind of idea of it started in what year perhaps
Well,
or?
like let's just say around 2018, I think was one of the first groups that got together. I don't know. I may be wrong about that, but um, oh shoot, I had to.
And can I ask you, is it still an ongoing process, or I mean, have all the 80,000 plus families' homes been fixed at this stage?
No, I mean they're talking until 2028.
Oh yeah, you said that
So that
2028.
this is just ongoing. And then again, like I said, every time they have another earthquake, there's repetitive damage to different homes. So, and depending on how that will happen, they stopped the extracting finally a number of years ago. But they said that,
Have
oh, the
they?
tipping point was in 1986 when they had an earthquake. Is when residents started to get together on that. But it wasn't until 2009 that they started establishing residents interest groups. Um,
Okay,
so yeah.
okay. When you mentioned the regulator, what is the equivalent of that in Ireland?
I think this was the gas regulator and how much gas um, would be um, would be extracted.
Okay, and they weren't informing the government even of what they were doing.
No, and what was interesting is that the Minister for Economic Affairs was the person who would set the limit on how much gas they would extract each year. And he was not getting information correctly from his civil servants. So, there was this, misinformation or no information. And so that clouded a lot of things. And even when they knew that there was, this cause and effect with the extraction and the earthquakes, they had another year of like high extraction, you know. So they totally they totally ignored the whole issue of the problems in Groningen, so
One,
that.
one, one has to think in the recent Doyle session where Peter Starty was asking Michael Martin questions about the ditch article. It either seemed that Michael Martin was wholly uninformed or was pretending to be uninformed. With the stuff he was coming out with, like everybody, you know, it, like the coming out with the cap, the 420,000 cap. That homes would be remediated up to that, and then forgetting to mention the square foot rate or square meter rate. So there's definitely a parallel there. That, I mean, does Michael Martin know what's going on, or has he been misinformed? One has to wonder. I mean, what do you think about that, Mary?
Well, we know that the government didn't do anything for 10 years. The same thing. They didn't stop. They didn't shut down the quarries. They didn't stop the building, which they should have, because then we wouldn't be in such a mess that we're in. So, the interest in the concrete industry, were we thrown over for that, Um, but who is protecting who in this?
Yeah.
Because certainly
Um,
they weren't listening to the homeowners here, and still aren't. There's still this ignorance that the people's document was made, and they're going around saying, well, they're going to start throwing us little bones to think that they can make us happy, when we've told them that we have a document that we want them to live up to.
you mean the People's Document?
Yeah, definitely.
I'm just trying to find. Did they? Oh yeah, 363 billion euros, right,
Hmm.
to the Dutch National Treasury. So that sounds like that. Is that money that went to the state?
Yeah.
Oh, wait,
And the
oh, it was.
funny the funny
Oh,
thing was,
hang on, Mary. So this was a state extraction. It wasn't a private company.
it was a private and public group called the Gasparov, and
Okay,
they were the ones. So the state was making money, Exxon was making money, and Shell were making money.
okay, and have they? I mean, what kind of remediation? What kind of amounts of remediation have been given to date, or are expected for the total repair of the 80? What was it? 80,000. Just to get this other.
Well, they're talking about
85,000.
8 billion from the year 2022 to 2028. They think it's going to be 8 billion.
8 billion. Okay.
But again, it's schools and things like, it's industry, schools, commercial buildings. You know,
And Mary, what were the main learnings do you think come out of that document?
um,
Are there things there that could inform homeowners to, for example, put forward to the government, or are there things that come out of that document that would, that would help
I think
homeowners
I
here?
think there's a list, or is that the do we would put up a list of the things? Maybe not. The issue of civil servants. There's now this issue that, when the civil servants in the Netherlands take their oath of office, that they include citizens too, because they were not doing that. They were looking at, the taxpayer, and the, like they would hear the exchequer, when in fact what they're saying, and one of the reports said, just um, stop this nonsense and fix things and get on with it. And again, every euro that was spent, 74 cents was on the implementation of it. And how costly is that, with all this bureaucracy that people were going through? And, there were all these other, they found that a lot of the parents were so involved in trying to, deal with the administrative piece of, the getting reconstruction on their houses, that, they were just, totally involved in that, and the kids were losing out, and all the things. And, they started to look at that. They've started to do some studies on it. And I'll get into that when we talk about the Ombudsman for Children, because they did a report too.
Right. So the case is that people have been living in these cracking homes for extended periods of time. Is that the case? Did they
That's the
mention
case. Yep.
how many
The-
years? Or
And the other thing is that, each house was different, so that, that they had to take each house. Each house was different, so it took a long time. You couldn't just give this pat. This is going to happen, because each house was different. So that was another issue. Um, with some of the row houses, they decided that they would try to do the row houses all at one time rather than, trying to do one at a time. And they did set up guest houses for people to stay in, um, and also allowing people to put accommodations on their land, and they would stay in the land while their houses were being renovated or rebuilt.
So that was some kind of like mobile home type thing,
Yeah,
was it,
yeah,
Mary? Okay. And
things
when you
like that.
say people could be like relocate located somewhere, was that were there occasions then when homeowners, for example, were removed from their locality, and then that would affect the kids going to school, stuff like that?
Yeah, they had to deal with issues like that. Yep, and those were big issues. Yep, definitely.
Right. Did you want to go on to talk about the children?
Yeah. Okay. So I think we've hit on a lot of things. The ombudsman for children and the ombudsman in general both wrote reports, and with recommendations and things like that. And this is part of the ombudsman report that they had developed lesson plans and curriculum, um, to educate children on the earthquakes and all about repairing cracks and things like that, and also trying to deal with the emotions, because you had the emotion of first dealing with the earthquake, and then afterwards what happened to children, after the earthquake was over, like a week later. And they did see children in schools that were, um, acting out, and, that it was having an effect, but they need to do better studies. This was just a sort of a preliminary study that they did. Um, they believe that making compensation easier, and one of the things in the, I'll go back to the parliamentary, was that they were saying that they need to be generous, which was interesting. That the government needs to be generous to the people. Um, anyway,
Well,
but making compensation easier because it was making it very difficult, and they had so many different types of schemes that neighbors were getting upset with each other about who got what and when, and it really was not helpful. Because
right.
people just stopped talking about things. There was
So
the issue around children having to move out and the relocation that they didn't know, very similar to what we have here. People can't plan their lives because they just don't know, um, when they're going to have to move out. And
yeah,
oh, one of the other things was is that they were sort of making the houses safe enough that if an earthquake came, you had a half an hour to get out of your house.
oh my God, really?
Yeah,
That's crazy.
I know, I know. So I mean, these are the things that they were setting things up. Which, how can you feel safe? Um, there's been a big issue around the issue of distrust in government, and this goes with the children in the area, but also the adults, that they just don't trust the government anymore. Um, Another issue is that there was a need for social networks, that people needed places to be able to go and talk to people, and have counselors available, and people to
Can
help them through this.
Can I
Um,
just ask you, Mary, when they say social networks, you mean in person? I think. Do you? Is that the case,
yes,
or
yes.
they don't just mean on online? Right?
No, no, no. This
So
is
so
like
this
in
would
person
be
community groups, um, with people that could be there to, they call it signaling. But basically, if somebody, like even a child, is showing some sort of behavior issues, sometimes teachers aren't aware of that, and they may be signaling that they are having anxiety about, say, the issue of earthquakes, or when they're going to have to move out of their home. So it's sort of teaching professionals how to pick up on this signaling. But yeah, and then so that they felt that these social networks were very helpful with counselors and um, people. I got to tell you something else. One of the recommendations on the parliamentary inquiry was that the government should provide legal assistance for people who are challenging the government. And I think we see this right now with the homeowners and the houses options being downgraded. And in the Netherlands, because of all of this legal stuff and people not having any power, they were talking about having funds available for people to challenge the government, which I thought was very good because otherwise, this is what happens. People, community groups get stuck and that they can't do anything because of the cost of litigation. So,
Can I ask? Can I ask you, Mary, when they spoke about the change of government? I mean, sorry, when you were talking, this whole that the government would provide uh, finance for people who need to challenge the government. Um, do you think did the report say anything about having to wait for a change of government that these recommendations could be introduced, or did the existing government recognize that they needed to do something?
no, they didn't talk about that. I mean,
Okay,
there were times when they talked about the minister and there was a change in ministers and one minister to another, started to, some of them would just went along with the way things were and other people challenged the information that they were getting. That was significant in that finally the ministers were demanding information and demanding other things. So yeah, but
did they say
they didn't talk about it from a political, no.
did they say when you spoke about them talking about these social networks that people could go to? Was there any more description about what those were like? I mean, was it like a community center or something that people would go to, and what would happen there? Was there any information about that in the report?
They did mention like a couple of different groups, and then those people testifying at hearings and things like that. That came out of these groups, and they're the ones they had like evening vigils about it. There were a number of protests that they had, um, and but they always felt like they were coming up against a brick wall um, in getting heard or having anything done. And then once something was done, it just added on to the bureaucracy and made things worse.
Because
And
there's nothing at all, in person, um, in Donegal, that is there where people can go, have a cup of coffee and talk to the person next to you and say how's it going with you, and how's it, there's nowhere for that kind of exchange to take place. Obviously there are the various Facebook groups, but there's nowhere where one can go in person, is there?
no, and I mean, what's lovely now is to hear that the homeowners with the um, the downgrade options are getting together. And I think getting together as a group like that, you have more people coming up with ideas of how to tackle this as to being on your own. So
So you
definitely,
talk you,
definitely, we need that. And um, one of the other things that they did set up, which was interesting, is they set up a special circumstances board, and this was around special circumstances that people had, and they funded this in such a way that they could even spend the money rebuilding someone's home with with the funds. So, for example, if you had a family that had a handicapped child that needed specific things in the house, and they would then be able to use that funds for these special circumstances. And we know so many people who've had these special circumstances that where the scheme just doesn't identify or take into account all the special circumstances that people have. We know that, the woman who talked about wanting to put wanting to build on her land next to her house, back in March at the Groningen Hotel. It was, why not be able to do that? Oops, I can't hear you, Grant.
Sorry, that was the first People's Document meeting, right?
Yes, yep, yep. So a number of things came out of this that we should definitely take a look at. And
Can I ask you just a bit more about the this report described the different effects that this cracking of 85,000 families' homes, the effects that's having on children. Like one of those things, for example, was children were worried about the future. Like maybe their family had been in that location for generations, and now the children are kind of feeling, well, we're not going to be able to live here in the future. That was one of the things that stuck out to me.
yeah, it was funny because a number of the schools didn't get involved in this research project, unfortunately. So it was really a small number of people. And then, of course, kids report everything was fine. But then at the end, they started to report on, like their issues with, you know, all their streets being, all the construction that's going on, and the sort of taking away of the village, because a lot of the homes were, like, say, built in the 1800s. So there was a whole preservation that was going on, but then some houses they couldn't preservate. So, the not being able to keep the old um, familiar things in place. There were old churches and things like that. So it's really, like urban renewal, basically. You know.
Um, was there any talk about how many people had to leave the area? I mean, was there any option to, you know, give up this cracking house and go and live somewhere else?
Well,
You know,
yeah, they did talk about that because the shrinking population, especially when the gas industry stopped extracting, because then there was job losses, and the businesses that are surround that whole industry. So people were pulling out and moving. Yeah.
so
Um,
so the people weren't tied in the help that the homeowners got from the state. They weren't tied to their defective homes. Then they were able to relocate and use the funds for that relocation. Is that the
no,
case?
no, 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 no. I mean, I'm just probably people that rented, or people just couldn't take any more of it and just left. But um,
So you think
there was a shrinking population was happening.
you think that people who had a defective home, they were stuck with those homes.
Yeah, they were stuck,
They
and
they
even
they, they couldn't relocate.
yeah, no.
Okay, okay. Um, One of the things that I thought was interesting was that the report said that parents um, didn't really discuss the issue with their children, and that children, also knowing that their parents were worried about things, didn't talk with the parents. Um, do you think that's a thing that might be replicated here or in Donegal?
Well, it's so hard with children because you don't want to upset them. Um, you know, like I said, they developed some curriculum around talking about, not only talking about earthquakes and talking about emotions, but they also talked about the different types of reinforcements that were being used. Because children didn't understand those kinds of things around different reinforcements and what was used and what wasn't. And of course, the science kept changing on that. So the building regulations kept changing on that too. And children didn't understand that, so they were talking about curriculum to teach the children these kinds of things. But they were definitely pushing. Everyone was pushing for an ease in being able to um, apply for these, you know, um, repairs
It would be
or
really
rebuilds. Yeah.
it would be really interesting to know, if there's any kind of education in in schools in Ireland that are suffering with this problem. Um, I kind of almost imagine that the state wouldn't want to be educating young people on this matter. Um, I don't. If there isn't anything, it would probably have to be something that the school devised themselves. Um, it would. What do you have any insight into what's happening? Is there any kind of education going on in schools, Mary? Do you know?
Not that I know of, and in fact, the Department of Education really hasn't, in my estimates, it hasn't really done much because, um, typical of our government, they've just kept their head in the sand over this, and we're going to have hundreds of kids that are going to be, you know, maybe having to relocate, and will they be provided with transportation to their schools that they've been going to? Um, all the leisure, all the, GAAs and, community centers that offer, activities for kids, they're all going to be, having to renovate, so, um, it's really hard for children because
Did
they're,
you want Did you want to talk about the recommendations, Mary?
I think I just did, Brand, talking about the recommendations for the Office for Children.
This
Yeah.
this this
Um,
slide.
yeah, this one here, that basically they were saying, this was, the ombudsman was telling them, the government and the ministers, to take control and show leadership. Stop hiding behind complex structures. Choose simplicity and transparency. Make clear who is responsible and who decides what, and make sure that one party takes control. Um,
These are all
this
so
this
relevant to the situation here.
Oh, definitely. Now this is a little bit old because I think this was like 2017 because they have stopped extraction, but limit gas extraction to an absolute minimum. Um, and then take the safety of the Groningen residents as the starting point. Stop economic interest from prevailing over the safety and health of residents.
Mary, just to interject there, I don't know how many times I've heard people say that you know that an accident is going to happen the way things are at the moment. And I honestly don't think the government is considering the safety of its citizens.
No, they haven't. I mean, they haven't. We know the issue of, how easily, the the houses that are being demolished come down. We know about the mold, and they haven't done anything. But you know what, Grant? The whole issue is they haven't admitted it's their fault. And the TD Richard Donahue, back about 3 months ago, just stood in the doll and said, "Admit it, it's your problem, and fix it." So that's as simple as it can get. Admit it and fix it. But they don't want to do that. They want to spend all their time making up, you know, knucklehead policies to drive people crazy. And that's what
I'm
they're
just looking.
doing.
I'm just looking here at item 5. Take responsibility for compensation and repairs. Like over here, it seems to be the government saying, okay, not only will we overturn your engineer's recommendation, but you know, you can just do you can do it all over again if something happens in within 40 years' time. I mean, it's like pushing the responsibility onto the homeowner instead of the state being responsible. Like once the remediation is done, the state's going to say, "You had your remediation. That's it. Our job's done. We're not interested anymore."
Hmm.
That's the way it seems to me, right?
Yeah.
But take responsibility for compensation and repairs.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, the next one here, put an end to unequal relationship between residents and NAM. That was the organization. Um, Make the handling of damage claims and repairs a public task. Ensure that
right.
residents don't have to fight for their rights anymore. And That's sort of where that legal funding, came in. Arrange damage handling and reinforcement in one go, because they were trying to separate the damage and then the repairs, and it was taking forever. So they're looking at doing that all in the one go. And then combine damage handling and reinforcement operations as much as possible. This saves time and money and reduces the burden on residents, and make sure that one party is responsible for both.
That's avoid damage handling and arrange, sorry, damage handling and reinforcement in one go. I mean, it seems here everything's like a little stage and then another little stage, and having to get the money from the council, paying off the previous contractor, and then it's like one little step after another instead of just having it all done in one go, as they say here.
Yeah. And like I said, so many people had to, there were like three big earthquakes. I think they were 3.0 on the Richter scale. And they there was more damage. So, if you've been through this process once and then you have to go through it two and three times, you'd be over the top. So, but it was a very interesting read. A lot came out of it, and there's a lot to think about in this. Maybe you can put the link on for people if they do want to read it. But
For
um,
sure.
I was just trying to synopsisize it a little bit.
Yeah, summarize it.
So thank you. Summarize it. Yes.
Um, so, you know, what seems really important to me, Mary, the Ulster University's survey on mental health,
Yep.
that was for adults only, right?
I think so.
I mean, it seems to me that it would be crucial for somebody to pick up the baton for young people. Somebody has to do research into how young people are being affected by this defective concrete crisis. I mean, we know that some children have spent their whole lives in this disaster. Um, there's no research into that at all, as far as I know.
No, and that's again, that's the government. So many things could be happening on a government level. Um, Regarding so many things, and they're just not doing their job, whether it's HSE or it's the Department of Education, um, elder affairs and the issue of pensioners dealing with this. There's so many studies that should be done. um, they want data on the impact of this. Do they really need this data? We've been telling them. um, they can't even put a scheme up that's going to give us the 100% that we deserve, because this was a government made disaster.
By the way, just I'll just mention it here. I mean, in a way, it deserves its own little video. But do you remember Joe McHugh kind of pleading with the minister for the minister to increase the scheme, increase the cap amounts, and increase the square foot rates, and that the minister had the opportunity to do that was coming up. So Joe McHugh was just asking the minister to implement what was already in the scheme. It wasn't like it was anything new being added. And at that time, Malcolm Noonan, Minister of State, was answering the question, and he used the term that homeowners would be getting 100% of eligible costs. 100% of eligible costs. I, I, I wonder what you think about that at all.
Well, unfortunately, what I say is bullshit. I
Yeah,
mean,
because
this is this is the same BS that have been handing down. You can't say 100% because we come in with a loss. We come in with a loss of our garages, our boundary walls. If we need septic tank walls repaired, we're coming in with a loss. Never mind the whole headache of everything. So
if you
from
if
the
you
get
have
go,
if you have special finishes in your house, then maybe you have kind of Italian flooring or you
that's
know
right. It's not a like for like, and we know that, and The government's just trying to do everything. They're trying to spend all their energy coming up with these schemes. And one of the things that was said was in this was break the pattern. This is a pattern that government's been doing. Whether it's the mother and baby homes, um, any compensation, they just want to squeeze the life out of people, and in doing so, they cause so much stress and mental health issues. But that's where they are, and they need to break that pattern. Um, and they said accommodate the people affected is more important than containing cost. And this is what we have to do. We have to say this is that accommodating the people to deal with this whole issue of defective blocks, they have to stop with the looking at it from a containing cost issue. Because if they really, really thought they were trying to contain cost, they would have done something 10 years ago, but they
Yeah.
didn't. So,
Could I ask you, Mary, if you're not comfortable talking about this, that's fine. But recently, the Ditch magazine published an article saying that the Attorney General had sent a letter to the Minister for Housing, um, explaining that the homeowners would be expecting their homes to be renovated to a standard where they are saleable. And by saleable, I regard that as a euphemism for mortgageable. So the Attorney General was saying homeowners are going to be expecting to have their homes remediated to a mortgageable state, um, and that would be too costly. Um, would you care to say anything about that? As I said, it's a sensitive issue, so maybe you don't want to. But
well, it's interesting because they play stupid in these housing committees, where they want to say, oh, we didn't think about this. Well, now they're thinking about it, but we now would know that they were thinking about it when they got that letter from the Attorney General. So, they're playing, they're taking us for fools here. And, unfortunately, reading the letter, it just was very, very hurtful you know, because we're going through this, we're vulnerable, and we have ups and downs, and 10 years of campaigning, and we still can't get through to the government. So people are tired, and then you get angry when you see this in writing of this is what government was thinking. And this is civil servants who want to deal with the exchequer without I think it's a unfortunately, I think it's a whole government think that the government has lost heart. They have totally lost heart. And again, you just what are the examples? The spina bifida children, the mother and baby homes, everything where they could have come out and had a heart, they didn't. And we're an example too. We're locked, we're trapped in our houses. We can't move. Many of us are in unsafe houses, and they just want to go around and talk about, we're going to try to get as much as we can. It's a disgrace, really, that the government is saying this and acting this way. And
it just makes me another significance of that letter to me was, um, it just meant that all the negotiations that the Micah Action Group were having with the minister, that the whole time, if the minister was acting on the advice of the Attorney General, the whole time they were pulling the wool over the homeowner's eyes.
yeah, well, I would even go back to the previous AG. If I were the ditch, I'd be going back to the Seamus Wolf and seeing what his correspondence was. Because if this was might have been said back during the first scheme, and it just was a repeat. You know,
Right.
but
And Mary, if you were I mean, I think I'm going to ask most people I interview this question, and maybe this, and unless there's anything else you'd like to say about the research you presented, I'll first ask you that. Is there anything else you'd like to add about the research? I'll include the links in the video description.
Yeah, I think, I mean, definitely, it would be for people who are looking for some, I don't know, some information as to how, the Netherlands did this. It's really interesting reading, and certainly, um, things, taking things from this and bringing it to our government to say here, save us all time and money and aggravation, and just do what the Netherlands have done in the sense of, stopping this, break the pattern of this behavior, and just get on with, fixing our houses. Um, you know, I don't know. That's all I can say.
All right, and just to let people know that there were two documents. The one about the how government have responded to the issue. I don't know if that's a good
Yeah,
summary.
it's
And the
it's
other
a
one,
the parliamentary inquiry.
excuse me, okay. And then the second document is the ombudsman's um, in reports on. They try to do a survey to determine how young people are affected by these homes that are cracking up. And just in relation to the Children Ombudsman, I did a very an unofficial translation of that one. So I can only give a link to the Dutch version of that because the translation was unofficial.